confirming that you guys can hear me all right.
Yes, I can.
Yep.
Great, thank you. And are you able to see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Uh, Good morning. This is the Commissioners' Information Meeting to hear from the Mr. Korth from the Colorado Air Pollution Control Division. Mr. Korth, Ms. Rosen, any preliminary remarks, or how would you like to proceed?
Nothing from me.
Mr. Korth, the form's yours.
Great, thank you. Let me screen share real quick. All right, can you all see my title slide?
We can.
Great, thank you. First of all, pleasure to be back. Part of this conversation again and continued collaboration with the Public Utilities Commission. I wanted to take just a moment before we get started to introduce Weston Carlos. Out of the 2023 legislation, we were able to create a new position within the Air Pollution Control Division that was focused on utilities. And Weston has been promoted from a role he held previously in one of my teams to the utility specialist role. And so going forward, you all will probably see some information from him. He may present at future meetings and future conversations, and he's getting integrated into a lot of the things that we've been working with Alex and your teams on over the last 6 months or so. So just wanted to take a moment to introduce him to you all.
And welcome to the process, Mr. Carlos. So great to have you.
You.
So we're going to just kind of walk through again the statutory history, a little bit of the background. These are things we've had conversations with you all before, but just want to quickly go over them for people who may not have heard them previously and may be listening in. And then we'll spend the majority of the time talking about Municipal Energy Agency of Nebraska, who they are, what they do, and then the verification work that we performed on their clean energy plan, the ongoing review, and then open it up for any questions and discussion that you all may like to have. So brief statutory history. This all began about almost 6 years ago now. In 2019, we created the greenhouse gas unit in the Air Pollution Control Division, and part of the legislation, specifically 19-236 and 19-1261, created the Clean Energy Plan process and the Safe Harbor process for verified CEPs. In 2021, the requirements were updated for voluntary CEPs and created ongoing tracking, which we'll talk about towards the end of this conversation. And then in 2023, there was more transparency that was directed for voluntary CEPs and expanded the utilities that were required to file a CEP. And that's really the reason why we're here today to discuss MEAN with you all. They are a wholesale provider to Colorado that supplies above the threshold of energy annually to require a clean energy plan. So again, just kind of summarizing, the guidance development process. It was about a year-long process that we did in 2020. The outcome of that was a guidance document as well as a verification workbook. We have used the same guidance, the same verification workbook for this verification that we're talking about today as the ones that you've previously seen in your proceedings, as well as other voluntary plans that we've presented to you all over the last 3 or 4 years. It uses the data that's collected by the utilities and submitted by them based on their planning processes. The data forms are standard so that all the submissions and verifications are the same. And then we tried to resolve items that were undefined or consistent where possible. A lot of those surrounded how to avoid double counting, how to look at retail versus wholesale sales, what emission factors to use. And again, we're using the same process, the same decision points, the same guidance and workbooks that we've used previously in verifications that you all have seen for this one that we're discussing today. So it's a single published workbook. It defines the inputs, it defines the pick lists, it has the emission factors and conversion constants, and has pre-populated equations. The whole purpose of this was consistency and transparency. It calculates both CO2 and total GHG emissions reductions, and then calculates them based on Colorado sales or Colorado retail sales as appropriate. So what we do in our verification report is that we're confirming that the statutory thresholds calculated by the workbook are accurate from the data that the utility has initially entered. We verify that all the data has been put into the proper places, that if there are revisions to the baseline or to future year emissions, that those were handled appropriately and correctly. Out of the 2023 legislation, we are obligated to hold a public meeting as well as the consultation briefing that we're having today. We held our public meeting on this verification last week on Thursday. We had 3 participants in that public meeting. And then after we've held the public meeting, after we've closed the public comment period and held this consultation briefing with you all, then we prepare and submit a final report into the informational docket where all these voluntary plans have been filed. So with the conclusion of today's meeting, 2 of those 3 public elements will be completed. The public comment period opened towards the end of February, is scheduled to close tomorrow, and then we'll be submitting the final verification report into the PUC informational docket by the end of this month. So I want to transition a little bit into a little bit of a discussion about who MEAN is and what they do for Colorado. It's important to note that MEAN is not a Colorado utility, but they do provide wholesale electricity to 14 small utilities within Colorado. They don't have any offices or resources here in Colorado, and all of their customers in Colorado are below statutory thresholds that would require them to file an individual CEP. And so what we're really talking about in this conversation is that wholesale supply of electricity into Colorado. MEAN supplies approximately 1%, just a slightly above 1% of Colorado electricity consumption annually. As I mentioned before, they don't operate any resources in Colorado. They have no fossil fuel generation in Colorado. This is important because what their plan is essentially a lever. It is not something that directly impacts our Colorado statewide goals, but clean energy to Colorado customers helps to maximize benefits when those customers are looking at electrification or other decarbonization strategies. And so it is an important piece, but it does not have a direct impact on our statewide inventory or on our statewide goals. MEAN has a 2050 carbon neutral vision that they adopted back in around 2020. They operate in 2 regional markets and the Western interconnection. And this is important as we think about in Colorado how our utilities are going to potentially operate in regional markets that are currently being stood up. And then MEAN utilized data from its current contracts and ownership rights. Their last resource plan was submitted to WAPA in 2022, and they used those information from the resources that can supply their Colorado customers. They operate all the way over to Iowa, sell into the MISO and SPP markets, and resources that are part of those pieces of their organization were not utilized in the Colorado calculations. And I think this is important to note because it's consistent with the approach that we are looking at with the organized markets of regionally constrained resources and being able to calculate emissions based on resources that can supply Colorado. And that's exactly what MEAN did in their workbook and in their data submission. So we published a draft verification report, as I said, towards the end of February. We are proposing to verify that they will achieve an 80% or greater reduction from their 2005 baseline levels. I do want to highlight and note that in the original data submitted by Mean, they had calculated an 83% reduction. We did identify some additional energy and emissions that should have been subtracted from their baseline. And so our verification is going to come in at that 80% mark as opposed to the 83% that was originally submitted to us. We published the data provided with the draft verification report on our website for the public comment process. And then with the submission of this plan, Mean is committing to, the state of Colorado a pathway to providing their Colorado customers with energy that's consistent with our statewide policy and our goals for emissions reductions in this sector. So this is just a table demonstrating the final results that we would be submitting with our verification report. Again, it's a relatively small amount of energy sales, relatively small amount of emissions compared to the rest of the utilities in Colorado. But the progress or the plan that Mean is submitting is consistent with the reductions that we're seeking for utilities across the state. So once they've submitted their report, the division then has an obligation to begin tracking against those interim year values and ensuring the utility remains on track with what they've committed to. We do that through review of information submitted under Regulation 22. In this case, direct emissions in Colorado, but they would have emissions associated with imported energy that would be collected in the supplemental data form that's part of that regulation. We will review their progress annually, and if they were off track for 2 consecutive years, then there's an obligation for us to consult with the Air Commission and potentially require Mean to file a new plan to get back on track with progress. And then in 2027, we have an obligation at the division to verify that the resources that were proposed in the plan will be in service, will be operational, will be supplying that energy to Colorado in 2030 to meet those reduction goals. And so, really most of the obligations going forward after this plan is submitted is on the division to continue to assess progress and ensure that we have a pathway to get to 2030. And I think that's really, really important to highlight today, especially because of all of the uncertainty and concerns that are being raised at the federal level about the pathways to some of these resources. And so, we take that obligation very seriously. Going to maintain that pathway to those reductions that have been committed to. We track against the interim year targets. This is just a display of what those targets are from the draft report and the targets that we'll be assessing progress against. So in summary, we are proposing to verify that the plan submitted by Mean will achieve those minimum statutory thresholds. We're acknowledging and committing to our obligations to ensure that these reductions are realized through the annual review of the data. And then, as I mentioned previously, if those reductions are not being achieved, then we have measures that we need to take, consulting with the AQCC to get the utility back on track towards those 2030 goals. So with that, I will stop the presentation and turn it over to the commissioners for any questions or comments that you all might like to share.
I'll just start off saying we appreciate what you're doing and for you coming by for the briefing. And turn it over to you, Commissioner Goman. Questions, comments?
Thanks, Mr. Corsi. Yeah, very much appreciate the briefing. Appreciate seeing you again. You're sometimes regular face here to brief us on these matters. So really appreciate the work you're doing there at CDPHE to kind of partner with us in these greenhouse gas verifications. Very helpful, not an area of our expertise. So we very much appreciate and rely upon, partnering with you and your agency to provide this technical expertise. I don't have any specific questions. I think it was pretty clear and understand your determinations, your role, and what it looks like going forward. So very much appreciate this. I guess one question maybe. Is there what would regular updates look like, or what does it look like going forward in terms of your interaction with the commission for like our understanding of compliance or non-compliance?
Thank you, Commissioner Gilman. Appreciate that question. And by commission, I assume you are referring to yourselves and not the Air Commission.
Yes.
So I'll take that in kind of two pieces. We are doing annual tracking after plans are filed, and we include that information in update briefings to the Air Commission. Would be happy to come in front of this commission in a CIM or other maybe written format if that's appropriate, and provide updates to you all around the same time that we give those Air Commission updates, which typically happen in the September-October timeframe each year. So I'm willing to work with Alex or others to determine what the right format is for that. But I think it would be very easy to provide that same level of information to you all that we're providing to the Air Commission.
Yeah, I think we'd really welcome that. And if you could provide it in writing to Ms. Rosen, she'll work with advisors and counsel to find a spot, a proceeding to put it into. And then we can look at presentations or SIMs as needed. Keep going, Commissioner Gilman. Back to you.
No, you stole my thunder. I was going to say that. Because I think it makes sense for us to be in the loop. I don't want to create you a bunch of extra work. So I'm not at all confident that in person is necessary on like a regular basis. But I think if we could get a written version of whatever you're providing, just so we can stay in the loop as far as compliance or non-compliance, then yeah, I agree with the chair. If something further needs to happen past that, I think we can figure that out as we go, but that would probably be a reasonable path forward, just so we understand that we can get some updates. Yeah, and appreciate you volunteering that. But that's my only question. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Plant.
Thanks. And yeah, thanks again for the presentation. I'm just have a quick question just out of curiosity. I recall, back when I was at the energy office and we did sort of a look at all the utilities in the state. The mean utilities were the only ones that had nuclear as a component of their generation. So I know that they've had that nuclear going way back. But of course, the baseline here is 2005. So I was wondering, has mean added to that capacity, or has it been mostly renewables, or are they buying that additional generation through the regional markets, or do you have any insight into that?
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Plant. Our understanding is the nuclear assets that Mean has as part of their portfolio really are serving the MISO market. They are not resources that would serve Colorado. A lot of the current resources are coal resources in Wyoming, and those are being transitioned to renewable resources, wind and solar and battery projects over the next few years. And so that's where you see the decrease in emissions associated with the Mean energy being supplied to Colorado.
Oh, okay. So they didn't even have that nuclear that we showed as a component of their generation way back in like 2008, 2009. They didn't even have that in their baseline there, or yeah, somewhere.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think on about slide 4 or 5, they utilized appropriately so, in our opinion, the resources that can supply Colorado, and they have a lot of other resources that are in Iowa, Nebraska, that supply other customers that are part of their larger organization.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the presentation. Thanks.
Just one question for you, Mr. Korth. So it sounds like Mean serves, I think you said 14 small municipalities in Colorado. Presumably they're in the Western Area Power Administration Balancing Authority. And as part of that, it sounds like they're going to join SPP RTO West when WAPA does. So will they be subject to the sort of emissions tracking and other requirements that are going to be associated with RTO West? Is that going to bind on the 14 municipalities, or would it bind on mean? I guess what I'm really asking is who's the member of SPP RTO West? Would that be the munis, or would that be mean, or would it be both? I guess it'd be both, right?
For purposes of emissions calculations, and thank you for that question. Mean has submitted the plan. All of these smaller utilities are not above thresholds to require a clean energy plan. And so what we anticipate for ongoing reporting is that Mean would be reporting all of the energy supplied to those 14 small utilities, and the emissions calculations would be essentially assessed at the level of Mean. In conversations with them, we understand that they are also looking at the Markets Plus and may be part of that, and part of the zone that would be supplying Colorado, as that moves forward over the next couple of years. And so I think it was, Commissioner Plant, you asked a question in December when we were talking about the Markets Plus conversation. How do we know what other resources are supplying Colorado, and how do we make sure or try to encourage resources within Colorado to be complementary of resources that can supply Colorado? And I think understanding what Mean does and which markets they are going to be part of is maybe the first step in some of that analysis that will really help inform, future conversations on that topic.
So is Maine is Maine not part of the Excel or the WAPA Balancing Authority currently? Do you know where they are, or do they have their own balancing authority, or you don't know? This
Do
is
not
more,
know I do not know
this
the
is
answer
more our
to that.
stuff than your stuff.
Yeah. But
All right.
my understanding is that if Excel and others were to join Markets Plus, that Mean would potentially be looking at that as well, because it would make a pretty natural synergy, with their Colorado supply and with Colorado utilities. As I mentioned previously, they currently operate in MISO, SPP, and the Western Interconnect. And so, trying to consolidate that, I think, is something that they are interested in looking at.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for the presentation today, all your help with the regional markets and everything you're doing. Great to see you, and we'll look for continued updates, written or in person, going forward. So thank you, Mr. Korth.
Thanks for your time today. Appreciate the opportunity to continue collaborating.
Yeah, and thanks for your help, Ms. Rosen, setting this up. With that, we're adjourned.